In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Let's have a seat. Well, how would you like to become a more loving person? I would like that. I'd like to be a more loving person. That's not easy, is it? Nothing easy about it, but it sure is a great goal. And actually, as we look at the scriptures, to be a loving person is something that is a goal for the Christian life. We saw it quite a lot in our readings today. In fact, we've been in 1 John for the first readings for a little bit, which is really fascinating letter. We're so used to Paul's letters, and the ones from John are really quite fascinating. But there are kind of three themes that we see in the first letter of John. And they actually weave together very, very significantly and deeply. They kind of can't work without the others, or that intermesh together. And those three, the sort of trinity of themes, if you will, is to love God and love others, to live in the light, and to abide in God. And again, all these things work together. Loving others, loving God, living in the light, abiding in God. We saw particularly in the gospel today the word abide coming up over and over and over again. And so we want to really concentrate on this idea of abiding, what that may mean. And I think it's actually, since these three things are woven together, something about becoming a loving person has to do with living in the light and abiding with God, whatever that may mean. Now, the word abiding is not a word that we commonly use, is it? We don't, it's not one, we know what it means, but we don't use that word. So it's a little antiquated in its own way. And yet it's the right word to talk about abiding, how to become a loving person, of what the relationship with God is to look like. What it means to truly live and to truly love is very much tied in with this idea of abiding in God. In fact, it's so significant that Jesus says in the gospel, he says, unless we abide in him, we can do nothing. We can do nothing unless we abide in God. And that's a very strong thing. Obviously we know how to brush our teeth in the morning, and we know how to do our work when we get there. We know a number of things. We know how to cook lunch and all sorts of things we know how to do. But the things that are actually eternal and have that kind of deep significance forever, that really change our lives, have to be tied in with abiding. So to be a loving person is inextricably tied in with abiding in God. And so the word abiding, a bit antiquated, we often think of that as sort of to abide is to live somewhere, right? Well, biblically it means a whole lot more than that. It's far deeper than that. It's kind of interesting that it shows up in the Gospels at one particular point where Jesus is gathering his disciples. And two of them, one of which was Andrew, the other one's unnamed, come to Jesus and they ask him a question. They say, "Where are you staying?" Well, that's an odd question to ask. Where are you staying? Of course, at this particular time, he's staying in a lot of different places depending on where he's at. But he says something very interesting. He says, well, listen, come and see. Just come and see. Follow me, and you will see where I live. So he's talking about something of not a residence, not an address he's staying at, but rather a state in which he is in. Now, he had plenty of places. He wasn't always a nomad in his life. He first 2 years of his life, he lived in Egypt. Remember, they escaped Herod's wrath. But after that, until he was about 30 years old, he lived in that little town of Nazareth. He was kind of a homebody in that particular way. And then even in his ministry, he took up, his headquarters was in Capernaum, in the house of Andrew. He stayed, and whenever he was visiting Jerusalem, he had a place to stay that was consistent. He stayed with the siblings Mary, Martha, and Lazarus out in Bethany, just outside of Jerusalem. So he was accustomed to a place to be, but that really had nothing to do with where his abiding was. His abiding was in God the Father. Remember that he would frequently get up before anybody else, and he would find a place of solitude where he could be alone, where he could be with his Father and be in communion with his Father. In that abiding with the Father, he's recharged and he has vision and direction for what he's supposed to do. He's empowered. He is made more loving. All those characteristics that we see in Jesus are birthed out of this abiding in the Father. Because he couldn't do anything except the Father did it in him. We can do nothing by ourselves without him. And so that abiding is something really deep and profound. And it's a place, it becomes a haven and a home for us. Not a particular place, but a particular state that we see in Jesus. And remember that when we look at the life of Jesus, we see that, we see this in John's letter today. He says this, whoever says, I abide in him, ought to walk just as he walked. So the way to abide in him is to walk as Jesus walked. So when we see him developing this particular pattern of abiding with the Father, that's the pattern that we're called to as well, to walk in the way that he walked. Because if we can walk in the way that he walked, we will walk into true abiding, true living, and true loving. But this is obviously more than a particular place. Now, I know that, because I know some of your stories, a lot of your stories I don't know, but I know, having heard people's stories, that in terms of where we grew up, where we lived, it's all over the court. Some of us had marvelous homes. We had fantastic parents and, just really nurturing places. That gives us a real head start in terms of life. Others of us didn't. Now, we can all come to a place of abiding in God, whatever our conditions, but it involves being clear about that and moving in that particular direction. Now, if I can be candid and honest and open to you about my own upbringing, I grew up in a middle-class home, and for the day of growing up, it was a nice house. Today, it would be, it's an okay house, but it was a nice house back then, and we had everything that we needed, never lacked for anything. And yet, my father was an alcoholic, a violent alcoholic, and my mother was mentally ill. So I didn't have and I was the oldest child, so I bore the brunt of everything. So it wasn't an environment where you could say, I'm really abiding here. This is a home for me. It was not a home for me. And that lack was something that actually propelled me in my teen years to really seek God. Because I knew that there needed to be something interior that needed to happen in life. And it wasn't going to happen there. There was no way it could happen in that particular environment. And so in my teen years, I got involved in Christian teen ministries and started making the connection. Because for me, it was a matter of survival, of being a real person, to actually have a place that I could begin to abide, because it wasn't going to be in that physical address. It was going to have to be somewhere else. And thankfully, I felt that and was compelled of necessity to try to begin to abide with God. Now, I'd like to say that the outcome of that is I'm a massively loving person. I try. I do my best. I want to be, though. Here's the thing is, I really want to be a loving person. I want to be like Jesus Christ in that way. And fortunately, there's some signposts along the way that God gives of the way toward that abiding. Of really being able to be a loving person. How do we become a loving person? Well, the kind of classic ways that we do that fall short. In fact, I would even propose this. If Jesus says you can do nothing without him, I think actually being a loving person is something we don't really know categorically what that looks like. Everything that we consider to be love is not as deep as it really is in God. And so in fact, to show you, how fouled up we are in this, we have this terminology of making love, right? And when that action of making love frequently has nothing to do with love, it can actually have something to do with disdain. And that we use that term as in that particular way means we don't really get it. And so, how do we become a loving person? Well, there are different strategies that we have. We might say that we're going to see what the characteristics of love are, and we're going to apply our will to do those particular things, to develop the discipline of doing those particular loving characteristics. Not a bad thing to do, but guess what? It isn't going to get us to that kind of love. Just won't. Or we think of love as an emotion. We often think about being in love and the emotions that we have at the very beginning. And of course, we all know if we've been in love in that way and get involved with somebody in a committed way, that those feelings abate a little bit. You can't maintain that intensity. So it's not really love in the deepest sense, just the emotion. Emotions are just unreliable. I mean, we do things because we have the emotion that we feel like it. Do you feel like changing the diaper? Well, no, you may not, but you still love that child. And so it goes beyond just the emotions. What about the intellect or the thinking process of information? We can read a book. We can go to a seminar about how to love, how to be a better spouse. We can go to a marriage seminar together. Good things to do, by the way. Excellent things to do. But the information alone is not going to help us to be a loving person. We may see where the signposts are. We may see what the goal is out there. But in itself, it's not going to get us there. All those things taken together are important pieces, but they will not alone get us there. It's only through abiding in God. That's the only way that we will ever get there. But again, fortunately, there are in our world signposts that God gives us. Where to go. Follow this path. And I can't say that I've achieved any of this stuff at all. I can just say that I've been around enough to know where some of the trail markers are. I know that much. And I can point those out. But we each have to take our own journey into abiding. It's the only way. I can't drag you there. Nobody else can drag you there. It's a journey that only you can take for yourself. Only you. And yet it's available. I've not achieved this by any stretch of the imagination, but I have caught glimpses of it. I know what the characteristics look like a little bit. There are times I've been moved in a loving way. There are times where I've been loved in a profound and deep, godly way. There are glimpses all through our world. If we'll pay attention to them and see them as signposts for a deeper journey in. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, I want to read a story. I came across this, somebody I've known pretty much all of my adult life, the sister of my college roommate, just posted this, and I just read it and said, oh, this is so perfect. This is such a glimpse of what love looks like. May I read it to you? God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. Genesis 1:31. At a fundraising dinner for a school that serves children with learning disabilities, the father of one of the students delivered a speech that would never be forgotten by all who attended. After extolling the school and its dedicated staff, he offered a question. When not interfered with by outside influences, everything nature does is done with perfection. Yet my son Shay cannot learn things as other children do. He cannot understand things as other children do. Where is the natural order of things in my son? The audience was stilled by the query. The father continued, I believe that when a child like Shay, who is mentally and physically disabled, comes into the world, an opportunity to realize true human nature presents itself, and it comes in the way other people treat that child. Then he told this story. Shay and I had walked past a park where some boys Shay knew were playing baseball. Shay asked, "Do you think they would let me play?" I knew that most of the boys would not want someone like Shay on their team, but as a father, I also understood that if my son were allowed to play, it would give him a much-needed sense of belonging and some confidence to be accepted by others in spite of his handicaps. I approached one of the boys on the field and asked, not expecting much, if Shay could play. The boy looked around for guidance and said, "We're losing by 6 runs and the game is in the 8th inning. I guess he can be on our team and we'll try to put him in at bat in the 9th inning." Shay struggled over to the team's bench and with a broad smile put on a team shirt. I watched with a small tear in my eye and warmth in my heart. The boys saw my joy at my son being accepted. In the bottom of the 8th inning, Shay's team scored a few runs but was still behind by 3. In the top of the 9th inning, Shay put on a glove and played in the right field. Even though no hits came his way, he was obviously ecstatic just to be in the game and on the field, grinning from ear to ear as I waved to him from the stands. In the bottom of the 9th inning, Shay's team scored again. Now with 2 outs, the bases loaded, the potential winning run was on base, and Shay was scheduled to be next at bat. At this juncture, do they let Shay bat and give away their chance to win the game? Surprisingly, Shay was given the bat. Everyone knew that a hit was all but impossible because Shay didn't even know how to hold the bat properly, much less connect with the ball. However, as Shay stepped up to the plate, the pitcher, recognizing that the other team was putting winning aside for this moment in Shay's life, moved in a few steps to lob the ball in softly so Shay could at least make contact. The first pitch came and Shay swung clumsily and missed. The pitcher again took a few steps forward to toss the ball softly toward Shay. As the pitch came in, Shay swung at the ball and hit a slow ground ball right back to the pitcher. The game would now be over. The pitcher picked up the soft grounder and could have easily thrown the ball to the first baseman. Shay would have been out, and that would have been the end of the game. Instead, the pitcher threw the ball right over the first baseman's head, out of reach of all teammates. Everyone from the stands in both teams started yelling, "Shay, run to first!" Never in his life had Shay ever run that far, but he made it to first base. He scampered down the baseline, wide-eyed and startled. Everyone yelled, "Run to second, run to second!" Catching his breath, Shay awkwardly ran toward second, gleaming and struggling to make it to the base. By the time Shay rounded toward second base, the right fielder had the ball. He was the smallest guy on their team, and he now had his first chance to be the hero for his team. He could have thrown the ball to the second baseman for the tag, but he understood the pitcher's intentions, so he, too, intentionally threw the ball high and far over the third baseman's head. Shay ran toward third base deliriously as the runners ahead of him circled the bases toward home. All were screaming, "Shay, Shay, Shay, all the way, Shay." Shay reached third base because the opposing shortstop ran to help him by turning him in the right direction toward third base and shouted, "Run to third." As Shay rounded third, the boys from both teams and the spectators were on their feet screaming, "Shay, run home, run home." Shay ran to home, stepped on the plate, and was cheered as the hero who hit the grand slam and won the game for his team. That day, said the father softly, with tears now rolling down his face, the boys from both teams helped bring a piece of true love and humanity into this world. Shay didn't make it another summer. He died that winter having never forgotten being the hero and making me so happy, and coming home and seeing his mother tearfully embrace her little hero of the day. May your day be a Shay day. Well, this is a moving story. There are plenty of moving stories like this, where the people in the story catch a glimpse of what abiding looks like and the outcome of that, of actually being able to show true humanity, true life, and true love. Do they stay in that place? Probably not. Next time around, they may do something different. But for that moment, they did. They saw the signpost, and they participated in abiding and thus in loving. And as we hear this story and stories like it, it stirs our heart too, because these are glimpses that we see of what it really looks like to abide and to love. These glimpses are all through our world. God gives us these all the time. And these are signposts on the way to deep abiding. Where do you live? It's not at your address. Follow the signpost. Pay attention to the glimpses and learn to walk as Jesus walked.